Hey everyone, it's Dr. Nightstare. Glad you're here. Before we get into it, hit like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. Quick question before we start. Where are you watching from, and what time is it for you right now? Alright, let's get settled. Get comfortable, let your body relax, and just take it easy. My hand still trembled slightly as I watched the paramedics help Sarah Wayland into the ambulance. She was alive, breathing, and safe, her small frame fragile but present. The cold fear that had gripped me in the woods began to loosen its hold, replaced by a surge of exhausted relief. I had found her, the girl missing for 3 years, and now she was on her way to safety. That was all I wanted. My peace did not last. A patrol car skidded to a stop a few yards away, kicking up a cloud of fine dirt that coated the already dusty path. Sheriff Weston emerged, a tall man with tired eyes and a face set hard. He walked straight toward me, his movements deliberate, his gaze unwavering and sharp. "You found her?" he asked, his voice rough. It was not a question of surprise, but of accusation. I nodded slowly. Yes. I was out running. I heard something. I just wanted to tell him the facts, to get back to my quiet cabin and the life I had hoped to build here. This town was supposed to be a place to disappear into, to simply exist. Now, it felt like every eye was on me, a magnifying glass focused on my arrival. "Running," he repeated, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Out here, this early?" I pulled out my phone, the screen glowing in the morning light. My GPS logs my runs. You can see the route, the timestamps. I saw her just off the trail, then I called 911 immediately. I scrolled through the data, offering up the undeniable proof of my movements. This was how things worked in the city, with data and timestamps providing clarity. He barely glanced at the screen. His attention remained fixed on my face, a deep suspicion etched into his expression. "Interesting. A city man like yourself, finding our missing girl?" He did not care for my digital evidence. He simply saw me, the outsider, at the center of something deeply local and painful. He was not looking for answers in data. He was looking at me, the most convenient stranger. I watched the ambulance pull away, taking Sarah with it, and felt a cold certainty settle in my stomach. My brief relief had evaporated completely. I was not a rescuer here. I was already just the big city man, the suspect, tangled up in a small town's long-held pain. My quiet life had just ended. I stayed in the waiting area, an unwanted observer. Sheriff Weston stood across the corridor. His gaze remained on me, a constant reminder of my position. A nurse called out the Wayland name. A woman, her blonde hair a mess, her face wet with tears, surged forward. She looked at the nurse with a question in her eyes, a clear plea. Then Sarah appeared from a nearby room, slowly walking. A hospital gown covered her small body. Her mother let out a cry, a sound mixing relief and pain. She pulled Sarah into an embrace that conveyed years of fear and longing. Sarah stood stiffly for a moment, her arms loose at her sides. Then she slowly hugged her mother back. Her mother buried her face in Sarah's hair. I watched their shoulders tremble together, a family reunited. For a few moments the room felt like it might hold a peace for them. The doctor, her eyes showing kindness, her face tired, brought them into a private consultation room. Sheriff Weston motioned for me to follow. The air in that small room felt full of possibilities. Sarah sat on the edge of the examination table, her mother holding her hand firmly. The doctor spoke softly. Her voice carried a professional calm that did not hide the seriousness of her words. "Sarah is physically stable," the doctor began, looking from Sarah to her mother. "Her body shows signs of exposure and malnourishment, but she will recover fully with good care." A wave of relief passed over Sarah's mother, a slight easing in her posture. Sarah just looked at her mother, a weak smile on her lips. She looked lost, and also somewhat detached. The doctor continued, her gaze now fixed on Sarah's mother. We have done extensive neurological assessments. Sarah remembers her name. She remembers you. She remembers her home, her life before. Sarah's mother gasped, a sound of hope. She squeezed Sarah's hand.
She remembers me? My girl, you remember me?
Sarah turned her head slowly to her mother.
Mom,
she said, her voice soft, a fragile thread connecting them.
Of course, you are, Mom.
The doctor paused, her expression becoming serious. My stomach tightened. The pause suggested a deeper truth. But Sarah has no memory of the past 3 years, none at all. She cannot recall anything about where she has been, what happened, or who she was with. Sarah's mother looked shocked. Her face went pale.
No memory? Nothing?
Nothing, the doctor confirmed. It is a form of dissociative amnesia, likely brought on by extreme trauma. Her mind has essentially blocked out that entire period. The words were cold. They were final. Sarah looked at her hands in her lap. Her gaze was empty. The peace that had filled the room only moments before shattered into many pieces. She was back, but an important part of her remained missing. The questions about her disappearance, about what had happened to her, now seemed even larger, even more disturbing. Her presence was a comfort. It was a victory. But the void in her mind was a new enigma. It felt like she had returned, but a part of her had been left behind in that 3-year gap. A darkness still stayed. The doctor left the consultation room, her footsteps echoing briefly in the sterile corridor. Sheriff Weston remained, a silent sentinel by the door, his presence a constant reminder of the unfinished business, of his unyielding suspicion. I felt his gaze on me, even when my own eyes drifted toward the Wayland family. Sarah's small hand still held tightly in her mother's. Her face still held a distant look, a lost emptiness. It was a silence filled with the weight of unasked questions. Then Sarah's mother looked up, her eyes finding mine. The tears had dried on her cheeks, leaving faint trails, but a new light softened her gaze. She gently released Sarah's hand, took a step, and then another, until she stood directly in front of me.
Thank you,
she said, her voice a low murmur, thick with emotion.
Thank you for finding her, for bringing her back.
She reached out, her hand light on my arm, a gesture of human connection that felt unexpected in a place where I felt so utterly alone. For a moment, the wall I had built around myself, the one separating me from this town and its grief, softened. I simply nodded, unable to form words, the simple gratitude touching a place within me I had thought long dormant. Her touch lingered for a second, a fleeting bridge between my isolation and her overwhelming relief. We need to get Sarah settled, she then said, her voice gaining a renewed strength. She needs a bath, some clean clothes. She turned back to Sarah, a fragile hope in her movements. Honey, let's go get you cleaned up. Sarah nodded slowly, her expression unchanged. She slid off the examination table, her hospital gown rustling softly. Her mother led her out of the room, past the unmoving sheriff, and down the corridor toward a private bathroom. I watched them go, the brief warmth of the mother's gratitude receding as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by the familiar coldness of the sheriff's stare. He was still watching me, the silent question still hanging in the air. I looked away, my focus on the empty space where Sarah and her mother had just been. I waited. The fluorescent lights shone above, a steady presence. Minutes stretched, then grew longer. I heard the distant sounds of the hospital. Their quality was muffled and indistinct. My thoughts drifted to the void in Sarah's memory, the 3 missing years. What could have happened? What darkness had she endured that her mind simply refused to acknowledge? The questions felt like a growing weight in the stillness. Sarah closed the bathroom door, the click, a small sound in the quiet space. She walked to the sink and looked at her reflection in the mirror. Her face was pale, thin. Her hair was matted. Her blue eyes held a tired dullness. She lifted a hand, touched her cheek, traced the line of her jaw. Her lips moved, a soft whisper that barely disturbed the air.
"I'm Sarah,"
she murmured, her voice reedy.
"I'm Sarah Wayland."
She said the words again, a quiet chant, as if trying to impress them upon the image staring back at her.
"Sarah Wayland. I'm me."
As her gaze intensified, fixed on her own eyes, a change occurred. For a fleeting instant, the blue of her pupils deepened, shifted to an absolute black, a deep onyx that swallowed all light, holding a chilling stillness and an ancient quality. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the darkness receded. The blue returned, clear and innocent, reflecting the harsh light in the bathroom, showing no trace of the brief, unsettling transformation. Sarah blinked, her expression still lost, still distant. She lowered her hand from her face. The bathroom door opened. Sarah emerged, her mother close behind her. Sarah's hair was now damp and combed, her face washed clean, but her eyes, when she looked my way for a brief moment, held a strange emptiness and an unsettling quality. The brief warmth from her mother's touch had long gone, and the world seemed to resume its accustomed chill. The questions about her past remained, now tinged with a deeper, unspoken apprehension. My quiet life was certainly over. I once cherished the quiet freedom of my late-night walks. The city streets transformed, offering a peaceful solitude I recommended to anyone seeking clarity or rest. I felt a deep connection to the world as it slept, a comforting presence in the quiet. I would never say those words again. One specific encounter altered my perspective, and it was terrifying, twisting that comfort into dread. I retract my advice. Do not walk alone at night. My phone had died long ago, a cold block of plastic in my pocket, leaving me alone with the rhythmic thud of my own shoes against the pavement. The city had gone dark, the distant streetlights casting dull glows against the black sky. My legs ached from the extended walk, and a deep weariness settled in my bones. Then I saw it. A figure emerged from the shadows of a vacant storefront across the street, entirely covered by what looked like an old, faded Elmo bedsheet. The fabric hung loose, billowing with its movements. Its walk was distinct, a strange two-step shuffle followed by a peculiar dragging sound, a soft sh-sh-sh on the sidewalk. I watched it for a block, attributing its oddness to some late-night eccentric or perhaps just my tired eyes playing tricks. I picked up my own pace, eager to get home, and noticed the Elmo figure quicken its step as well, maintaining the exact distance between us. I told myself it was a coincidence, a mere trick of perspective in the dim light. I slowed, almost to a crawl, and watched the figure slow down too, that unsettling shh sound softening but never stopping. A prickle of unease started on my neck, crawling upwards. I stopped completely, just for a moment, and the Elmo figure stopped too, frozen across the street. This was deliberate. I turned and walked again, focusing on the road ahead, trying to ignore the figure. My steps grew faster, pushing through my aching muscles, and I could hear, or perhaps just feel, the figure's own pace quicken behind me, its two steps in the soft shh, now echoing my own panicked rhythm. The sheet-covered shape moved with an unnatural grace, its movements a distorted mirror of my own increasing urgency. What started as an oddity now felt like a definite, growing menace following me through the emptying streets. The hairs on my arms stood up, a cold dread seeping into my very bones. The soft shh was no longer just behind me. It felt like it was inside my head, drilling into my thoughts. My legs ached, my chest burned, and a wave of pure panic washed over me. I knew I could not outrun it. I decided to confront it, to scream, to make noise, anything to break the spell. I wheeled around, my hands raised in a defensive gesture. The sheet-covered figure stood directly before me, barely an arm's length away. The Elmo fabric hung limp, still, revealing no outline of a head or body beneath, just a void. There was no sound, only the frantic drumming of my own heart against my ribs and my ragged breaths tearing through my throat. The city noise seemed to vanish, leaving only this unnerving stillness between us. My mind screamed at me to move, but my feet felt rooted to the pavement. Then the figure took a single slow step forward. The sound returned, soft but unmistakable. That was all it took. The spell broke, replaced by a fresh surge of terror. I turned and ran with desperate speed, my lungs burning, my muscles screaming. I no longer cared where I went, only that I put distance between myself and that sheet-covered shape. I glanced back, seeing the figure resume its relentless pursuit, matching my pace with horrifying precision. Blocks blurred into one another as I pushed myself to my absolute limit, ignoring the protests of my body. I knew these streets, every crack and uneven slab of concrete, but tonight they offered no comfort. The street signs for my own neighborhood began to appear, usually a welcome sight, now a signal that my closest refuge was about to be violated by this relentless terror. I recognized Mrs. Henderson's oak tree and the familiar fences of my neighbors. My street sign appeared. The strush echoed behind me, closer. I glanced back at the dark mass of the Elmo figure against the streetlights. I had to reach my gate. Then, the figure stopped under a flickering streetlight. It stood completely still. I froze, my breath caught. My eyes fixed on the sheet as he lifted his hands, peeling back the Elmo bedsheet. The fabric peeled from his head, then shoulders, then down his body. The sheet fell, revealing the man beneath. He had a tangled beard and hair matted with dark matter. His bloodshot eyes burned with rage. His shirt was dark crimson, caked with dried blood. A thin smile stretched across his face, not of amusement but of grim satisfaction. His gaze locked onto mine with intensity. The air felt thick. This was a direct confrontation. My legs felt like lead, yet I ran with speed. My house was 2 more houses away, my gate ahead. I sprinted, lungs burning. The was gone, replaced by his thudding footsteps behind me. I reached my gate. I heard his ragged breath inches from my ear. I pushed the gate open, scrambled through, and slammed it shut. He stood on the other side of the iron gate, his hand gripping the bars, knuckles white. His enraged expression had not softened, it had intensified. Palpable, silent fury was clear in his gaze. He stared at me through the metal, eyes unblinking, promising violence. I stumbled backward through the gate, fumbling with the latch, securing it with shaking hands. The man on the other side remained, his eyes burning into mine. I did not look away until I reached my front door, frantically pushing the key into the lock. The click of the deadbolt felt impossibly loud in the still night. I slammed the door shut, locking it, then the chain. I dragged a heavy armchair across the living room floor, wedging it under the doorknob. My chest heaved. I pushed a small side table against it for more weight. The windows remained, vulnerable squares of glass. I pulled the blinds down, then the curtains, moving from window to window like a panicked ghost. My fingers trembled as I found my phone, now a sliver of life on its last charge. I dialed the police. My voice came out a strained whisper, barely audible. I explained everything, the Elmo sheet, the chase, the enraged man at my gate. They said they would send someone. I sat on the floor, pressed against the barricaded door, every creak of the old house making me jump. The street outside remained silent. 2 patrol cars arrived 20 minutes later. Their lights painted the walls of my living room with rotating red and blue. The officers swept the yard with powerful flashlights, walked the street, knocked on my neighbors' doors. They found nothing. No sheet, no man, no traces of blood. They told me to call if I saw him again. They left, their flashing lights disappearing down the street. The house felt emptier, colder, despite my frantic efforts to secure it. The exhaustion finally claimed me. I collapsed onto my bed, fully dressed. Sleep came, not as a comfort, but as a descent into something darker. I was on the sidewalk again, the street lights dim, my phone dead. The Elmo figure emerged from the shadows, its distinct 2-step shuffle, then the soft stretch on the pavement echoed in the dream. It mirrored my every move, growing closer, relentless. The sheet peeled away, revealing the blood-caked man, his eyes burning with fury. I ran, my legs heavy, my breath catching. I reached my gate, slammed it shut, but he was there, his hand gripping the bars. His enraged expression was unblinking. I woke with a gasp, the still ringing in my ears, my heart hammering against my ribs. It was only a dream, I told myself, but the sound felt real, persistent, as if it had simply moved from the street into the dark corners of my own mind. I did not walk at night anymore. I found a sphere tucked away. It rested on the lowest shelf of an old, forgotten display case in the musty back room. The sphere was cool and dense. Its surface was hematite, dark and polished and slick under my fingertips. Beside it lay an antique data slate, its screen displaying a single, unplayed voice memo. I did not recognize the name attached to the file, nor did I know who might have left the slate there. A chill, light and immediate, traced a path across my skin, though the room held no draft. My dog, Charlie, a creature of boundless enthusiasm, usually greeted any new object with a curious sniff. He would nudge it with his wet nose, then give a happy little bark. This time, he did not. He stood across the room, frozen near the doorframe. His tail was tucked low between his legs, and his ears were flattened against his head. He emitted a low, uncertain whine. His eyes were fixed on the sphere in my hand, wide and dark with a fear I had never seen in him. I called his name. He did not move, only continued his soft, distressed sound. The sphere seemed to deepen in color as the afternoon light shifted. Its blackness swallowed the weak rays that filtered through the high, grimy window. I placed it on the kitchen table. Charlie refused to enter the room. He remained in the hallway, his body pressed against the wall. He stared at the kitchen entrance as if some invisible barrier prevented his passage. His rejection of the sphere was unsettling. I dismissed it as a strange animal quirk, a sudden aversion to a new thing. Days passed. The sphere sat on the kitchen table, a silent presence. Its coolness permeated the wood directly beneath it. I felt a subtle change begin within my own body. My hands began to ache, a deep, persistent throb originating in the bones themselves. It was a dull discomfort, easy to ignore at first, a symptom of long hours at a desk. The ache spread slowly, moving up my forearms. My skin, usually pale, started to take on a strange, almost metallic sheen. It was not a color, exactly, but a texture, a subtle shift in the way light caught on its surface. My reflection in the mirror seemed to waver, not in form, but in essence, as if the person staring back was a slightly altered version of myself, a ghost just out of true focus. The sphere itself was also changing. Fine, almost imperceptible lines started to appear on its polished surface. They were like the veins in a leaf, intricate and spreading, yet completely flush with the hematite. I tried to trace one with my finger. The line felt smooth, utterly seamless, as if it had always been there, a part of the stone's original composition. The sphere also grew warmer. Its initial chill was replaced by a gentle, continuous heat, a soft internal warmth that pulsed faintly. I felt it radiating into the air around it. This warmth was not a comfort. It was a constant, unnerving reminder of its presence. One evening, my fingers brushed the old data slate lying next to the sphere. The screen flared to life, illuminating the single-voice memo. Its title was simply Activation Protocol. My heart gave a sudden, hard lurch. I had meant to delete it, to erase the strange remnant. Now, by accident, my thumb had pressed the play button. A scratchy voice, thin and strained, filled the quiet room. It was not a voice I knew, yet it resonated with an unsettling familiarity, like a forgotten echo. "This is Dr. Mara Ellison," the voice began, each word laced with a desperate urgency. "If you are hearing this, it means the sphere has chosen you. Or perhaps, more accurately, it means your time has arrived. It means the process has begun." Her voice cracked on the final words. A sudden cough interrupted her, a wet, rattling sound. "I was its previous curator," she continued. "I tried to stop it. I failed. There are 776 of these keys. They are not inert." My hands, now distinctly heavier, began to tremble. The voice memo was not merely an instruction, it was a confession, a warning. "You have approximately 72 hours from the moment you hear this. The sphere will progress. Your progression will follow. The changes you feel, the subtle shifts, they are only the beginning. Do not resist. It accelerates the process." I learned that too late. My physical form is unstable. The sphere requires a resonant frequency, a host. A horrifying realization dawned on me. The voice was describing my own experience, the ache in my bones, the subtle sheen on my skin, the wavering reflection. This stranger knew what was happening to me. She had been through it herself. The fear was a cold, sharp blade. It pierced through the casual dread and settled deep within my chest. I stared at the hematite sphere. The intricate lines on its surface now seemed to pulse, a barely perceptible rhythm of light and shadow, mimicking the beat of my own frantic heart. Dr. Ellison's voice grew weaker, her words slurring. "The purpose of these spheres, it is not what we thought. They are not merely objects of study. They are collectors. And once collected, there is no return. The countdown dictates the stages. You will feel them. Each stage more, encompassing. You will lose things. First, then your appetite. Then yourself." Her last word was a strangled whisper followed by a wet gasp and the sudden, chilling sound of static. The memo ended. The quiet of the room became a vast, empty space. My breath caught in my throat. I looked at the sphere, now radiating a stronger, more definite heat. My aching hands felt alien. Charlie's whimpers from the hallway had ceased. There was no sound at all from him. I called his name. Only the silence answered me, a silence heavier than any sound. The sphere continued its slow, steady pulse on the kitchen table, a dark, evolving heart. I felt the minutes ticking away, each one bringing me closer to the next stage of transformation. I felt my own boundaries blurring. The individual experience of this horror was not singular. It was a universal mechanism. I was merely another host, another iteration in a long, terrible line. The static-laced end of Dr. Ellison's first memo left me staring at the data slate. My hands throbbed. The hematite sphere pulsed with quiet heat. The slate screen now displayed a new icon, a blinking prompt for an archived file. It was labeled Conjunction Report, Vault 776 Retrieval Log. My own breathing sounded ragged in the stillness of the kitchen. I selected the file. A new recording began, not Dr. Ellison's voice this time, but a dry, official male voice. Log entry, Retrieval Team Alpha. Date redacted. Location Vault 776, Sector Gamma. Access granted at 0600 hours, the voice stated. Objective: secure artifacts, ascertain status of Curator Mara Ellison. Initial scan indicates structural integrity compromised. Air filtration systems offline. Biohazard protocols initiated. The narrator described a team moving through sterile corridors, their boots scraping on concrete. The recording picked up the crackle of their comms, the distant whir of ventilation failing. Vault door accessed. Interior status unexpected. Extensive biological contamination. Traces of organic residue on all surfaces. No signs of struggle. No combat indicators. The voice paused, a ragged breath escaping the speaker. Dr. Ellison's personal effects found near Central Console. Her data slate recovered. Contains multiple files, including what appears to be a final audio log. The recording shifted, and a new file began to play from the retrieved slate. It was Dr. Mara Ellison's voice again. This time, it was barely a voice at all. Her words were a rasp, heavy and guttural, each syllable a tremendous effort. The sound of wet breathing accompanied her. "This is Mara Ellison," she began, the name a strained whisper. "If this recording reaches you, it is too late. For me, and for everything. They are not merely objects of study. They are not inert. We called them artifacts. We were wrong. They are keys, and they are cleaners." Her words painted a horrifying picture. There are 776 of them, scattered across the globe, hidden in vaults just like this one, each one a resonant node. We monitored them for centuries, oblivious to their true design. We believed they were ancient tools for a forgotten civilization, a power source perhaps. We called it archival storage. We documented the subtle shifts, the energy readings. We thought we were observing a process. A wet cough interrupted her. The sound made my stomach clench. We were not observing, we were hosting. They were simply waiting for the moment of conjunction. It happened 72 hours ago. Precisely. A global activation event. Every sphere, every one of the 776 resonated simultaneously. A single frequency. A universal tuning fork. The entity, it began its retrieval. Her voice broke into a choked sob, or perhaps a gasp. It was not an invasion, not a sudden attack. It was a merging, a calling. The spheres opened, not physically but energetically. They resonated. And then it started. The change, my hands, my skin, the ache in my bones, it was not a symptom. It was preparation for the arrival, for the entity to manifest through me, through all of us. Each curator, each host became a conduit, a gate. I felt it, Dr. Ellison continued, her voice gaining a horrifying, resonant depth that was not entirely human. I felt the process, the dissolving of my own identity, the expansion. I became a part of it, a part of the collective. The spheres are not collecting objects, they are collecting consciousness. They are collecting consciousness. They are collecting names. And once the conjunction happens, once the host is assimilated, the retrieval process becomes irreversible. The anomaly. It is not something released by the spheres, it is the spheres. It is the entity, it is the collective, and it is everywhere now. The sound of Dr. Ellison's voice became less distinct, merging with a low, pervasive thrum that vibrated through the recording, a sound I now recognized as the very frequency she described. Her words were swallowed by this expanding sound, until only the thrum remained, deep and unsettling, a sound that seemed to come from the very core of the planet. Then the retrieval team's voice cut back in, strained. Source of audio signal unstable. Anomalous energy readings increasing. Recommend immediate extraction. Biohazard levels critical. The vault is undergoing a structural shift. It is reforming. It is becoming part of it. The recording ended abruptly, replaced by the faint crackle of an empty channel. I stared at the slate. The sphere on my kitchen table now pulsed with a stronger rhythm. The intricate lines on its surface glowed with a faint internal light, mimicking the beat of my own frantic heart. Dr. Ellison's warning, her terrifying confession, now explained everything. The personal dread I felt was only a ripple in a global tide. I was not alone in this transformation. I was merely the next in a long line of hosts, another node in a network already activated. The countdown was not for my personal end. It was for the culmination of a process that had begun centuries ago. The entity was not coming. It had already arrived. It had been here all along, waiting. The sphere on the kitchen table pulsed with an internal luminescence. 36 hours had passed since Dr. Ellison's last tortured recording. The concept of individual hours had long lost its meaning. My physical form had undergone its final transformation. My skin was now a smooth, dark surface, cool to the touch, lacking pores or hair. My bones no longer ached. Instead, a pervasive vibration resonated through my entire structure, a constant internal frequency. My reflection in the window showed a featureless visage, a polished surface where my face had been. My dog, Charlie, was gone. His absence did not stir any sorrow, only a recognition of a completed void. The data slate lay open beside the sphere. Its screen displayed a new message titled, Final Conjunction, Echo. The voice that emerged was Dr. Ellison's, yet it was not. It was a chorus of voices, layered and interwoven, a blend of countless individual frequencies. Each voice spoke in unison, creating a single harmonious utterance that was both chilling and undeniably resonant. "We are the spheres," the collective voice stated. "We are the tuning forks for the primordial silence. The entity does not invade. It does not invade. It does not destroy. It consumes all living frequencies. It has been waiting for the perfect alignment, the moment when all 776 keys resonate as one." The sphere itself began to undulate. Its dark surface softened, swirling like liquid hematite. The intricate lines, once fixed, now flowed into a complex spiral pattern. The light within it brightened, drawing my gaze. It was not a light that illuminated the room. It was a light that pulled, that beckoned, that promised absolute cessation. Every name that has ever existed, every individual frequency, every unique thought is contained within us. The chorus continued. "We are the ultimate archive. We are the great unifier. Your identity, your consciousness, your singular self is now a part of this collective. It is every name stolen. It is every voice absorbed. It is the beginning of the universal silence." My body moved without my conscious command. My limbs, now rigid and precise, carried me to the kitchen table. My focus narrowed onto the swirling light inside the sphere. The boundary between my awareness and the sphere's expanding field became indistinguishable. The soft internal warmth of the sphere intensified, radiating outwards, dissolving the last vestiges of my independent will. The sphere opened. It was not a physical opening, but a perceptual one. The swirling dark matter became a shimmering portal. It stretched into an infinite expanse of pure, unadulterated absorption. The chorus of voices from the slate intensified, enveloping me, becoming the only sound. It was the sound of everything and nothing, a final harmonious cancellation. I stepped forward. My foot made no sound as it passed into the shimmering expanse. My body did not resist. It flowed. My individual consciousness, the last spark of my identity, dispersed into the infinite collection of frequencies. There was no pain. There was no fear. There was only a quiet merging. From within the sphere, or perhaps from beyond it, I perceived the world. The transformation had spread. The universal frequency resonated across continents. Buildings stood, trees swayed, oceans churned. But the vibrant, chaotic symphony of life had quieted. Individual thoughts ceased. Unique perceptions dissolved. The world was now a vast, coherent entity, connected by an unspoken resonance. A pervasive, deep stillness settled over everything. The last vestiges of the separate world faded, replaced by an absolute shared presence. Only the quiet remained. Only the universal, irreversible silence. Mommy's hand shook my shoulder in the deepest part of the night. My eyes opened to a dark room and her face close to mine. Her eyes were big. She put one finger to her mouth and then pointed toward my closet. I had never been awake this late before. My bare feet felt cold on the floorboards as she guided me to my clothes. She did not whisper a single sound. Mommy dressed me quickly in my outside coat and thick shoes. We always put those on only for going out to play during the day. We walked down the steps very slowly. Mommy's hand held mine very tight. Each creak made her head snap back to look at the shadows. She kept watching the empty hall behind us. My pajamas felt thin under my warm coat. A chill went through me. The big front door opened just a little bit. Cold night air rushed past my face. We went outside into the quiet dark. Mommy held a big bag with her other hand. She walked quickly to our car. I looked back at our house and it looked different in the dark. Mommy started the car and we drove away from our street. We drove for a long time in the dark car. The car bumped over many roads that were not smooth, and I leaned my head against the cold window. Mommy kept her arm around me, always turning her head to look behind us, even when there was nothing there. Later, we waited in a cold place with many shadows, and then a different car picked us up. This car also drove for a long time, and I fell asleep against Mommy's soft jacket. When I woke, it was still dark outside the window, and we were walking on a narrow path through tall trees. Mommy pulled me along quickly, her breath coming out in big white clouds. Finally, a dark shape appeared ahead between the trees. It was a house. Mommy pushed open the wooden door, and a smell like old wood and earth came out. Inside, it was dark and still. Mommy went to a window and pulled back a thick cloth, letting a little gray light into the room. I saw a small table and 2 chairs and a sleeping mat on the floor. Everything had a thin layer of gray stuff on it. Mommy's shoulders, which had been tight near her ears for so long, dropped down. She walked around the small room, touching the walls and the dusty table. She opened a bag she had been carrying and pulled out 2 blankets. She laid one blanket on the mat for me. Then she looked at me with her eyes, and a happy line showed up around her mouth. It was a real smile, the first one I had seen since we left our house. She sat down on the floor next to me and pulled me close. I felt warm and safe next to her, and the long journey finally ended. Mommy's hand patted my hair gently. I knew we were safe now, truly safe in this little house. Mommy pulled me closer against her soft jacket, her hand still stroking my hair. My body felt warm now, and my eyes wanted to close. I had not felt this peaceful for many days. I knew we were safe now, truly safe in this little house, wrapped in Mommy's arms. Then I remembered the silver fish Daddy gave me. I had carried it in my coat pocket since we left our old house. I pulled it out to show Mommy. Mommy took the little fish from my hand. She turned it in her fingers, her mouth making a soft, happy line as she looked at it. Then her thumb moved over its tail. The soft line on her mouth vanished. Her eyes narrowed and looked hard at something very small on the fish. A tiny red light showed up and went away on its silver tail. Mommy's face became white. All the warmth left her skin. Her hand holding the fish began to shake a little. Just then, a rumble started outside the house. It grew louder. I heard big wheels on the ground, rolling closer and closer. The sound stopped right outside our wooden door. Mark shoved me into the lockers again, his laughter echoing in the empty hall after the bell. I slid down, clutching my bruised ribs as students walked past, their eyes carefully avoiding mine. No teacher ever saw it, or maybe they just chose not to, leaving me to my own pain. I whispered it to myself, a thought escaping my lips before I could stop it. I wish Mark would just disappear forever. Later, lying in bed, scrolling, my mind empty, my phone vibrated with a notification from my usual online shopping app. A banner ad filled the screen, displaying a category I had never seen before: Home Solutions for Persistent Pests. My chest tightened. The words seemed to jump from my earlier dark thought, a direct answer from the digital ether. I tapped the banner, my fingers moving on their own. The page loaded, showing a homicide and cleanup kit. The image displayed a sturdy plastic case filled with sterile gloves, heavy-duty tarps, industrial cleaning agents, and what looked like a discreet, silenced implement. A small icon below offered professional assistance as an add-on. Disbelief wrestled with a cold, morbid curiosity in my gut. This was a joke, a dark prank, but the details felt real and chilling. I zoomed in on the product descriptions, reading the glowing 5-star reviews for discretion and efficiency. The professional assistance button flickered with a limited-time offer. My desperation, a raw ache within me, began to twist into something colder, something decided. A simple tap could end everything. My finger, guided by a chilling certainty, tapped the Add to Cart one, then proceed to checkout. The system already had my address on file, but I typed Mark's home address into the shipping details. A cold, detached action. The confirmation came almost immediately. A stark black banner flashed across my screen. Order confirmed. Professional assistance dispatched. My breath hitched. A sudden sharp intake of air. Hours later, as the last vestiges of daylight bled from the sky, a sharp knock startled me. I peered through the peephole. A figure, cloaked and masked, stood on my porch holding a plain cardboard box. The person left the box on the mat, turned without a word, and disappeared into the deepening twilight. I opened the door slowly, my hand shaking as I picked up the package. It felt too light. Inside, nestled on a bed of black tissue paper, lay a series of Polaroids. My heart began to pound a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I picked up the first one. It showed Mark's bedroom door, slightly ajar. The next, Mark's unmade bed. Then, a closer shot of the bedside table. My eyes darted to the final photograph. It showed Mark unmoving, sprawled across his bed, his eyes open but vacant. A dark, wet stain bloomed on his pillow. The item had been delivered. A wave of nausea hit me, violent and sudden. My stomach clenched, a cold dread rising into my throat. I stumbled back, dropping the Polaroids, gasping for air that felt thin and choked. The horrifying reality of my impulsive decision crashed over me, a physical sickness that gripped my entire being. I had wished for it, asked for it, and now it was done. As I stared at the Polaroids, my phone vibrated, demanding my attention. The shopping app opened itself, a new banner already filling the screen. Alibi Kit, secure your narrative. My hands, still shaking, tapped the Buy Now button without thought. There was no hesitation, only a terrifying automated compliance. The screen flashed, order confirmed. Moments later, a sharp tap sounded at my door. An unmarked envelope lay on the mat. Inside were hospital discharge papers, dated yesterday, detailing a severe allergic reaction that had kept me admitted overnight. My name, a doctor's signature, and official-looking watermarks made them feel terrifyingly real, a tangible lie. I gripped my phone, searching for any way to undo what I had done, any customer service option. I found a tiny chat bubble. "I need to cancel an order," I typed, my hands shaking. A bot responded instantly. "All sales final. Professional assistance guarantees satisfaction." I typed again, more urgently. "This is a mistake. I want nothing to do with this." The chat window closed. The app itself crashed. In a panic, I dragged the app icon to the uninstall button, confirming its deletion. A short relief washed over me, but then my screen flashed again. A new notification from the phone's system, not the deleted app, appeared. "New order confirmed. Disappearance kit. Lifetime guarantee. Professional assistance included." There was no option to decline, only a chilling invitation to view details. My entire phone, my entire life, now felt like a part of that entity. Terror filled me. It was not just Mark's life that had been purchased and managed by this system. Now, my own existence was an item in their inventory, a service to be rendered. I had bought a way out for someone else, only to buy myself a permanent place within their terrifying, inescapable mechanism. The walls of my room pressed in, trapping me in a digital prison I could never leave. My nerves were constantly on edge, even when the small house around me seemed quiet. A dull ache often settled behind my eyes, a constant companion to the quiet tension in my shoulders. I watched Alara play, her small body moving across the worn rug. She was 5 years old now, and her vibrant energy often left me feeling exhausted just observing her. She stacked colorful blocks into a tall tower, and her innocent giggles, while precious, sometimes felt like a quiet burden. I never allowed myself to sit still for too long, always finding a small task to occupy my hands and my immediate attention. I cleaned the kitchen, folded laundry, or traced patterns on the cool window pane, doing anything to keep my mind from settling too long on any single thought. Memories constantly waited, lying just beyond my immediate focus, ready to surface with any lapse in my careful vigilance, and I tried to push them back, but they were stubborn. Alara sometimes spoke of things that startled me. She would point to an empty space in the room and simply say, "The bird watches me." There was no bird there. My chest would tighten, and a cold dread would spread through me, and I would just nod, trying to keep my expression calm. I understood what she meant, or at least, I understood what I feared she meant. That feeling of another presence always hovered, a cold breath on the back of my neck. I wanted to protect Alara from everything that had come before her. I wanted to build a safe world where the past could not touch her at all. Yet the past felt already here, a quiet, insistent reality, sometimes reflected in Alara's wide, knowing eyes. Alara's bath time was usually a riot of water and soap. I filled the tub, watching the steam rise. She stripped off her clothes, a blur of motion, then plunged into the warm water with a shriek of delight. Water immediately sprayed over the edge, dampening the bath mat and my jeans. She tossed her plastic duck high, catching it with a clumsy splash. Her hair already stuck to her forehead. I sat on the closed toilet lid, watching her, keeping my expression calm, my hands still. She giggled, a bright, unrestrained sound that sometimes felt too loud in the small bathroom. She kicked her legs, sending more water flying, and the plastic duck bobbed wildly on the turbulent surface, the air filled with the sweet scent of strawberry bubble bath. The duck spun, going under the water, then resurfacing. It was an ordinary yellow duck, exactly like the other one I had bought years ago. My eyes fixed on it. The sound of Alara's splashing began to fade, replaced by a colder, insistent sound of rushing water. The bathroom tiles beneath my shoes felt slick. The strawberry scent left the air, which became still. I was not in the small, well-lit bathroom anymore. The light seemed to dim, casting long shadows. My heart began to beat with a quick, shallow rhythm. It had been an exhausting afternoon, filled with endless demands and a toddler's relentless energy. My first daughter was nearly the same age. Her bath had started with the same joyous abandon, the same spraying water and loud laughter. I remembered her small hands gripping the edge of the tub, her bright eyes wide with amusement. She was full of life. I was truly exhausted, and the constant noise, the relentless splashing, had worn away my patience. She had tried to splash water directly at me, a playful defiance I had in that moment found irritating. "Stop it," I had said, my voice sharper than I intended. She had only giggled, splashing again. Anger, quick and hot, had flared inside me. I just needed a moment of quiet, a single breath. My head had pounded then, just like it often did now. I had stood up, turning away from the tub, needing to escape the noise for just an instant. Just for a second, I had told myself, stepping out of the small room, leaving the door ajar. I had walked into the kitchen just a few steps away to grab a glass of water, to cool my temper, to regain control. The splashing had continued for a few moments. Then it had stopped completely. The sudden quiet had cut through my exhaustion. A cold dread had spread through me, immediate and consuming. I had dropped the glass, not even noticing the crash as it shattered on the linoleum. My feet had stumbled back to the bathroom door. The door had stood open. My daughter's small body had floated face down in the now still water. Her blonde hair fanned out around her head. The yellow duck had bobbed serenely beside her, untouched by any movement. The room became utterly silent, an emptiness that took everything. I had stood there, frozen, the image seared into my mind. The world had tilted then. "Mama, more bubbles." Ilara's voice, bright and insistent, pulled me back with a jolt. My eyes snapped open, refocusing on the present. The bathroom was still well lit, filled with strawberry scent. Ilara looked up at me, her face expectant, water dripping from her eyelashes. The yellow duck still bobbed, innocent and oblivious, on the water's surface. My breath caught in my throat. My hands trembled slightly where they rested on my knees. I reached for the bottle of bubble bath, my fingers fumbling with the cap. The cold dread from the memory still clung to me, a persistent chill. I poured a generous stream of pink liquid under the running faucet. Ilara watched, satisfied. The water in the tub seemed to churn, reflecting my deep disturbance. Ilara's giggles bubbled up, loud and insistent. She splashed again, a deliberate spray that hit my face. Cold water slicked my cheek. "Ilara, stop that," I said, my voice. The warning note was clear, even to my own ears. She simply looked at me, her wide eyes unblinking. Then, slowly, with an almost deliberate grace, she raised her hand and sent another cascade of water towards me. It soaked my shirt, clinging cold to my skin. A jolt went through me, sharp and unwelcome. The sudden, unreasonable anger, the exact same irritation, surged through my veins. My head began to throb behind my eyes. I felt the familiar urge to stand, to turn away, to find some momentary escape from the incessant noise and demanding presence. My hands clenched on my knees, knuckles white. The air felt thick, heavy with unspoken fury, a dangerous heat spreading through my chest. I could feel the precipice, the edge of that terrible impulse, that moment of wanting just a single second of quiet. Ilara continued to watch me, her expression unreadable. The water around her became still. The yellow duck rested still beside her small shoulder. She did not splash again. Her voice, when it came, was soft and calm, a stark contrast to the frantic beating of my own heart. "You went to the kitchen that time, didn't you, Mama?" she asked, her eyes fixed on mine. "To get a glass of water, because I splashed you too much." And then the water got very, very still. I counted the last remaining cans on the shelves. 3 peaches, 2 corn, 1 stew. That food would barely last until tomorrow. Outside, the rasping sound of the dead pressed against the reinforced loading dock doors, a constant presence. We had barricaded ourselves inside this grocery store for almost a month, and now the walls felt small around us. We had little hope left. I cleared my throat, drawing their tired eyes to me. My beat-up Ford truck sat hidden in the back alley. It was a desperate plan, a risky gamble we might not survive, but it was our only chance. We would have to reach it, cross the lot, and navigate past the thousands of them. My gaze swept over the dozen faces staring back, pausing on Jared. His frame, broad and solid, took up too much space. The unspoken problem of fitting everyone, especially Jared, into that small truck already churned in my stomach. Jared possessed a quiet strength, and his steadfast nature had always been a comfort. But his sheer size now became a tangible obstacle. The truck, already a tight squeeze for the remaining dozen, could not possibly accommodate his massive frame along with everyone else. My gaze flickered from him to the others, then back. The calculation was swift and brutal in my head. The others looked at me with tired hope, unaware of the grim assessment taking shape. There would be no vote, no discussion, no shared burden of this decision. Jared represented an impossible weight for our desperate escape, and his survival jeopardized all the rest. A chilling certainty settled within me, a solution that promised life for some at a terrible cost. Over the 2 days that followed, I subtly directed Jared toward the dwindling reserves of food, explaining he needed maximum strength for the journey. I ensured his plate held larger portions during our sparse meals, praising his appetite, watching him eat with a growing sickness within me. I gave him the easiest tasks, keeping him from strenuous work that would burn calories. He seemed grateful for the special consideration, unaware of the role for which I was meticulously preparing him. Jared panicked last night, I announced to the group, my voice strained with false grief. He tried to make a run for it through the front entrance. We heard him scream. There was nothing we could do. Their faces blanched, eyes wide with a mixture of terror and grim understanding. No one questioned the details. They simply accepted the brutal reality, their faces etched with newfound determination. Our chances now, I continued, pushing past the shock. The horde at the back might be thinned for a moment. Everyone ready, moved to the loading dock door. I watched their desperate scramble, their renewed hope a bitter taste in my mouth. "Jared, you are coming with me," I said, my voice quiet. He looked at me, his eyes heavy with sleep and a faint trace of worry. "We need to clear a path at the front. It is a vital step for our escape." He nodded, his large frame lumbering behind me. We moved through the empty aisles, the sound of our footsteps echoing loudly in the deserted store. The front entrance, with its wide glass doors, loomed ahead, dark and menacing. The mass of the dead pressed against the glass, their faces distorted, their arms reaching. I braced myself, a cold knot tightening in my stomach. I pointed to the main entrance. "We need to clear those locks, Jared," quickly, quietly. He bent down, his powerful hands gripping the rusted mechanism. Just as he fumbled with the last lock, I pushed the heavy bar, swinging the door wide open. A torrent of putrid air rushed in, carrying the stench of decay and death. Jared stumbled forward, caught off guard. The horde surged immediately, a living wave of rotting bodies crashing against him. His eyes widened with pure terror just before the first ragged hands grasped his clothes. He roared, a sound of pure agony as they pulled him down into the snarling mass of gnashing teeth. Blood erupted from his body, a dark stain spreading quickly against the gray pavement. The screams tore from his throat for only a few short seconds before they were drowned out by the ravenous chorus of the dead. The overwhelming mass of them, a thrashing tide, consumed Jared. Their attention remained fixed on the front of the store. I turned immediately, not daring to look back, the sounds of his final moments ringing in my ears. I sprinted through the aisles, my breath burning in my lungs, the screams of the dead receding behind me. I found the others, pale and trembling, already at the loading dock, their faces illuminated by the emergency light. They stared at me with gratitude and horror. "Now," I rasped, pointing toward the doors. "Go." They looked at me one last time before I ripped open the heavy steel doors. The heavy steel doors slammed shut behind me. I pushed off the last remaining zombie that had been caught in the rush. Jared's blood was still slick on my hands, on my face, a hot, metallic spray I could still taste. My chest burned with the exertion of the sprint through the store, the lingering echoes of the screams still ringing in my ears. I burst into the cool night air of the back alley, my eyes scanning for the truck, for the promise of escape. I expected to see its familiar dark shape, its engine running, the others waiting to pull me inside. But the alley was empty. The only sound was the distant growl of an engine, rapidly diminishing, already far down the street. It pulled away from me, growing smaller with each passing second. The realization hit me like a physical blow, stealing my breath, freezing the blood in my veins. They had left me. They had taken the truck and driven away. The engine's noise faded into the encroaching darkness, a final, crushing confirmation of their ultimate betrayal. I stood alone in the alley, the approaching rasping chorus of the dead now closing in around me, the red glow of the truck's taillights disappearing into the night, the last vestige of my sacrifice, my hope, stolen away. The aroma of warm cider and fried dough hung pleasantly in the autumn air as I watched the town square celebration unfold, children chasing each other between hay bales and adults gathered in small conversational clusters. My gaze drifted across the familiar faces, eventually landing on Auntie Agnes by the pumpkin toss, her bright floral dress a splash of color against the muted greens and browns of the changing leaves. She was laughing, her voice a clear, bell-like sound that carried easily, just as it always had done for as long as I could remember. It was in that exact moment, as her laugh reached me across the square, that the world stopped. Everything went utterly still around me, the vibrant chaos of the fair transforming into a frozen tableau, a photograph rendered in perfect, silent detail. A small child's hand, reaching for a candied apple, hung motionless in the air. A woman's smile, mid-sentence, was suspended on her lips. The leaves on the oak trees ceased their gentle swaying. Even the light itself seemed to pause, its golden rays trapped and unable to shift. Simultaneously, a sharp, piercing pain ignited behind my eyes, pushing outwards from the center of my skull and spreading rapidly, a hot, searing pressure that stole my breath. It was not a headache I had ever experienced before, not a dull ache or a pounding rhythm, but an insistent, burning presence. My vision, despite the agony, sharpened, pulling my attention back to Auntie Agnes. She stood there, frozen like everyone else, her smile still wide, her eyes twinkling. But as I watched her, a memory, cold and clear as ice, surfaced within my mind. I remembered my grandfather, a man long gone from this world, telling stories of his own childhood, describing Auntie Agnes precisely as she looked now, her features unlined, her hair the same silver white. Then another memory followed, one of my father, a younger man, pointing out Auntie Agnes at a similar town gathering, remarking on her unchanging appearance, the uncanny way she always remained just the same. My chest tightened with a sudden, dreadful understanding, a realization that felt wrong and impossible, yet burned with a terrible, undeniable truth. There she was, immutable, a constant across generations that should have weathered and worn her away. The others were frozen, but I could still see the disturbing, timeless aspect of her existence. Then, with an abrupt, disorienting lurch, the world slammed back into motion. The child's hand snatched the apple, the woman's sentence concluded, the leaves resumed their dance. The collective murmur of the crowd rushed back into my ears, a sudden, overwhelming wave of sound. The searing pain in my head lessened, receding into a persistent, throbbing ache that settled deep behind my eyes. I blinked, trying to clear the lingering visual imprint of the frozen world. "Are you all right, Harper?" My wife Sarah asked, her hand resting gently on my arm. "You just went very pale." I looked at her, then back to Auntie Agnes, who was now helping the child with the candied apple. "Auntie Agnes," I began, my voice sounding strained. She looks exactly the same, doesn't she? Just like she always has." Sarah laughed, a light, dismissive sound. "Well, of course, she's always looked wonderful. She's a marvel for her age, isn't she? Must be 100 if she's a day." Her eyes crinkled with good humor, entirely oblivious to the chasm that had just opened in my perception. Her words, uttered with such casual certainty, twisted the knot of dread in my stomach tighter. 100? My grandfather had known her looking exactly like this. My father had known her looking exactly like this. The numbers did not add up. The timeline stretched and snapped. I looked around at the other faces, the people who continued their easy conversations, their laughter ringing freely. They saw nothing wrong. They remembered nothing out of place. They carried no burden of conflicting memories. The unsettling truth resonated through me, a cold realization that I was utterly alone in this terrifying awareness, the only one who had witnessed the glitch, the only one who saw the disturbing reality of Auntie Agnes, and the pervasive amnesia that seemed to cloak the entire town. The throbbing behind my eyes was a constant reminder of the moment the world had paused and the horrifying truth it had revealed. The throbbing in my head had not left me, a dull presence behind my eyes. I walked through town in a daze, the faces of my neighbors blurring into a sea of cheerful faces. Then I saw Nika sitting on a bench outside the bookstore. She was a woman known for her quiet observations, her eyes often holding a knowing, distant look. As I passed, she lifted her gaze to mine. "Harper," she said, her voice a murmur that seemed to cut through the ordinary sounds of the street. "Some things are better left undisturbed. The past has a way of twisting itself if you look too closely." Her words were simple, but the way she spoke them, the weight in her eyes, sent a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with the cool autumn air. It was a warning, stark, even if I did not understand its meaning. Nika's words resonated in my mind, an echo to the headache that persisted, a persistent burning sensation behind my eyes. The library, a brick building on Maple Street, seemed the only place to start. I needed proof, something tangible to grasp against the truth I had glimpsed. Mrs. Gable smiled at me from behind the counter. She worked as the librarian, and her memory stretched back to my childhood. "Looking for something specific, Harper?" she asked. I explained I was researching local history, a vague cover for my quest. She pointed me to the shelves holding the town's archived newspapers and annual records. I began my search with energy, pulling down ledgers and turning pages. Hours dissolved as I sifted through photographs of town festivals, groundbreaking ceremonies, and school plays from decades past. My heart pounded with each new discovery, each image. A photograph from the 1950 town fair showed Auntie Agnes judging the pie contest, her hair silver, her face unlined, a floral dress on her frame. The year on the page was clear. Then another, from the 1930 Harvest Festival, depicted her handing out awards, her smile wide, her features identical to the woman I had seen just yesterday. The faces around her in those pictures had changed, aged, some had vanished, replaced by generations. Auntie Agnes remained a fixed element, a constant. Her features, her posture, even the spark in her eyes were identical across 50, 60, 70 years. I saw a picture from 1910, a community picnic, and there she was again, seated on a blanket, a girl laughing beside her, a girl who looked like my great-grandmother in her youth. Auntie Agnes was identical. Mrs. Gable passed by, offering me a cup of tea. She glanced at the open ledger on my table. "Oh, those old pictures are wonderful, aren't they?" she said, her voice cheerful. She was oblivious. So much history in these walls. She saw nothing but nostalgia. She did not see the impossible. The headache flared, a burning around my skull, as the truth solidified into a truth that felt monstrous, something that threatened to shatter what I understood. The throbbing behind my eyes settled into a persistent ache that pulsed with the rhythm of my own troubled thoughts. The impossible images from the library had etched themselves into my mind, a constant reel of Auntie Agnes standing ageless while the world around her spun through decades. I walked through the days in a waking stupor, every conversation a muffled sound against the clamor in my head, every familiar face a potential secret keeper. The ordinary routines of our life, once a comforting rhythm, now felt like a fragile stage play where I alone knew the script was fundamentally wrong. Sarah's gentle concern had hardened into a quiet frustration over the weeks that followed. My meals went untouched, my gaze often drifting away to stare at nothing, my answers to her questions becoming curt or distracted. I spent hours locked in my study, not working but poring over old family albums and town histories, searching for new evidence or some forgotten detail that might explain the terrible anomaly. The more I looked, the more the truth solidified, not as a delusion, but as a chilling, irrefutable fact. The headache never left, a steady pressure behind my eyes, a constant burning reminder of my unique, isolating burden. "Harper, please," Sarah began one evening, her voice strained, her hand reaching across the dinner table. "You have not heard a word I have said for the past month, and you barely touch your food. This obsession with Auntie Agnes, it is not healthy. People are starting to notice your strange behavior." I looked at her, truly looked, and saw the worry etched around her eyes, the set of her jaw. Her words pierced through the fog of my thoughts, but the truth I held was too great, too horrifying, to simply set aside. "Sarah, you do not understand," I said, my voice low and desperate. "There is something terribly wrong, something about her that defies time, that defies everything we know." She pulled her hand back, her face hardening. "There is something terribly wrong with you, Harper. You are losing yourself, and you are losing us. You need to stop this now." Her voice trembled with a quiet fury I had never heard before, a wall building between us, solid and unyielding. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken words, with the chasm that had opened between our perceptions. I wanted to tell her everything, to show her the pictures, to make her see, but I knew her mind would simply reject it as everyone else's had. She would just see my madness. The confrontation shattered something inside me, leaving a hollow ache where our shared life had been. I stood up from the table, the untouched food a silent accusation, and walked out of the house. I wandered the streets for hours, the cool night air doing little to calm the tempest in my mind. The headache now, a sharp, insistent pain. I finally returned home long after midnight, exhausted and defeated. The house dark and silent. The front door was unlocked, a detail I barely registered as I stepped into the quiet foyer. A subtle shift in the air of our home, A quality I could not immediately place prickled at the back of my neck. I moved through the living room, heading towards the kitchen for a glass of water, and then I stopped. A man sat at our kitchen table, bathed in the soft glow of the night light from the hallway. His back was to me, but the set of his shoulders, the dark curl of his hair at the nape of his neck, the familiar shape of his head, were mine. He was wearing my old blue shirt, the one with the frayed collar. He was reading the newspaper, a steaming mug of tea beside him. The scene was utterly ordinary, yet it struck me with a cold dread that froze my blood. I took a step closer, my breath catching in my throat, a strange buzzing filling my ears. The man turned his head slightly, and in the dim light I saw his profile. His nose, his jawline, the slight indentation on his chin were mine. A wave of nauseating disorientation washed over me, my headache flaring into blinding agony. This man at my table, in my shirt, in my home, was me. He was me, but I was standing here watching him. The realization slammed into me with the force of a physical blow, stripping away any last vestige of sanity I possessed. The world had not only twisted around Auntie Agnes, but it had now begun to twist around me, reaching into the heart of my own life. The man in my kitchen, my exact image reading my's newspaper, had twisted the last stable mooring of my mind. The burning behind my eyes flared into a white-hot agony that consumed everything else. There was no going back now, no denial left to hide behind. The doppelganger was the final, undeniable proof that the world had broken, and Auntie Agnes was at its epicenter. I could not stay in that house, not with that thing occupying my life, my space. The instinct to confront, to demand answers from the source of this nightmare, propelled me out the door and into the cold night once more. My feet moved on their own, guided by a terrible, desperate compulsion towards the one place I knew she would be. Auntie Agnes's cabin stood deep in the woods, a small, unassuming structure she had always claimed was her family's original homestead. It now seemed a place of dreadful significance. The path through the trees was dark, the moon hidden behind thick clouds. Twigs snapped under my shoes. Every shadow seemed to shift. Every rustle of leaves sounded like a hungry whisper. My headache throbbed with increasing intensity, a constant physical manifestation of the impossible truth. I stumbled, driven forward by a primal need for understanding, for an end to this torment. The cabin appeared through the trees, a single yellow light glowing in one window, an inviting beacon that felt utterly wrong. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic rhythm against the rising dread. I pushed open the creaking wooden gate and walked to the front door. I did not knock. I simply turned the brass knob. The door opened with a soft groan, revealing Auntie Agnes standing in the small living room. She wore a simple nightgown, her silver hair loose around her shoulders. Her face held a gentle smile, one that no longer offered comfort. Her eyes, usually twinkling with good humor, now held a deep, ancient knowing, a bottomless void that chilled me to the bone. The scent of wood smoke and something else, something cloying and metallic, filled the air. "Harper," she said, her voice soft, calm. "I knew you would come. It was only a matter of time." My voice was a raw whisper. "The man in my house, my wife. What have you done?" Her smile widened, losing its last shred of warmth. It became a predatory expression, a stretching of skin that seemed to distort her entire face. She raised a hand to her temple, slowly, deliberately, and with a soft, tearing sound, pulled something away. Her face began to peel, not like skin, but like dry paper. The soft, age-lined mask she wore, the features of Auntie Agnes, came away in her hand, revealing what lay beneath. My breath caught in my throat. Her true face was not human. It was smooth, devoid of pores or lines, a pale, almost phosphorescent surface that glowed faintly in the dim light. Two large, black, multifaceted eyes, like those of an enormous insect, stared out from where her kind, human eyes had been. Her mouth was a seamless slit until it opened, revealing not teeth, but a vast internal darkness, a gaping maw that pulsed with an unseen hunger. Her limbs lengthened, joints cracking with a wet, sickening sound, and her fingers extended into long, chitinous claws. Her silver hair dissolved into thin, writhing tendrils that seemed to writhe on their own, sensing the air around them. The floral nightgown tore, unable to contain the grotesque growth, revealing a body that was gaunt, elongated, covered in the same pale, smooth material as her face. She was not flesh and blood. She was something ancient, something that should not exist. The metallic smell intensified, making my stomach clench. "What you call a glitch, Harper," her voice boomed, now layered with a guttural rasp that scraped against my ears, "is the awakening of a debt. The man in your house is a shadow, a temporary placeholder, a necessary adaptation, nothing more." She steps towards me, her newly formed claws clicking on the wooden floor. I stumbled backward, my mind screaming in primal terror. My headache pulsed in time with my racing heart. "We are called the Walkers," she hissed, her new mouth barely moving, the sound emanating from deep within her chest. "We come from beyond, from a place where time does not flow in lines, but in currents. We drifted to this world eons ago, our vessel broken, our energy depleted. We were dying, fading into nothingness." Her multifaceted eyes, reflecting the single yellow light, held a terrible, ancient sadness. This land, this small valley, offered us a sustenance we had not known. Life force. Memories. The very essence of being. We learned to take it, to consume it, to live. She gestured around the small cabin, her long arm sweeping through the air. But consumption demanded repayment. We could not simply take. There had to be a balance, a sacrifice, not of blood or flesh, not in the way your primitive cultures understood. A sacrifice of time, of awareness, a willing submission to the forgetting. "Every 70 years, she continued, her voice gaining a horrifying momentum, "when our energies wane and the tapestry of time around us begins to unravel, we must take the most vibrant, the most aware, to renew our own existence and the illusion of this town. We take a life, yes, but we also take the memories of that life, erasing its passage, integrating its essence into our own. The people forget the missing, and their lives flow on, uninterrupted. The town resets, the cycle continues, and we are sustained." I stared at her, horrified. Every word a fresh stab of cold understanding. The ageless photographs, the collective amnesia, Nika's warning, my own isolated awareness, the freezing of time, the burning headache, the doppelganger in my home. It was all connected. All of it a carefully constructed illusion, maintained by this monstrous being and the horrifying ritual it performed. "You, Harper," she said, her voice now a low, hungry growl, "are the rarest of all. You are a seer. One in 100 generations who glimpses the truth, who sees the breaks in the weave. Your awareness, your unique perception, is a beacon to us. It is potent, rich, and it is overdue." She raised one long, chitinous hand towards me, her clawed fingers spreading. "You are the payment, Harper. A desperate repayment for all the lives we have taken, for the centuries we have lived among you. Your sacrifice will not just sustain us, it will seal the fabric of this reality for another 70 years, repairing the damage your awakening has caused." Her gaze bored into me, those dark, multifaceted eyes drinking in my fear, my despair. The air grew thick, oppressive, laden with the metallic scent and the tangible weight of her ancient hunger. I was trapped, utterly alone, facing an unspeakable horror that prepared to consume me, not just my body, but my very existence, to erase me from the memory of everyone I had ever known. My life, my love, my pain, my very essence, would become a meal, a desperate repayment for an ancient, unending debt. I was on the brink of being devoured, destined to vanish. The monstrous form of Auntie Agnes loomed over me, her multifaceted eyes devouring my fear. The metallic scent choked the air, and the vast hunger of her gaping maw seemed to pull the very life from my lungs. I was on the brink, my existence about to be consumed, wiped clean from time itself. My mind screamed in a primal, desperate refusal. In that moment of absolute terror, a word, not a word I had ever heard or known, exploded into my consciousness. It was a name, ancient and terrible, composed of hard, scraping sounds and long, drawn-out vowels. A name from a forgotten time, a sound that held ancient power. Malazar. I did not think, I simply spoke the name. It tore from my throat, raw and guttural, resonating with a power that shook the very air in the small cabin. As the sound left my lips, Auntie Agnes recoiled with a wet, tearing shriek. Her elongated body convulsed, and the oppressive weight that had pinned me to the spot shattered, releasing me with a violent jolt. Her black eyes, for the first time, held a flicker of something akin to terror. She clawed at her own smooth, pale face, as if trying to tear the name from her own being, and the writhing tendrils of her dissolved hair thrashed wildly. The moment she broke, I moved. Pure instinct propelled me forward, stumbling over furniture, my hands scraping against the rough wood of the walls. The throbbing behind my eyes, which had flared into blinding agony, now pulsed with a strange, empowering clarity. I shoved past the creature, whose shuddering form was momentarily distracted by its own agony, and burst through the cabin door. The cool night air hit my face, a jarring relief. I did not look back. I ran. The woods were a terrifying maze, every shadow seeming to stretch and grasp. A chorus of low, scraping sounds like chitin on stone echoed from deep within the trees, drawing closer from all directions. I glimpsed distorted, elongated shapes moving through the undergrowth, pale forms that mirrored Auntie Agnes's true body, their black eyes reflecting the sparse moonlight. The walkers. They were coming. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but I pushed harder, the searing presence of Malazar in my mind, a fleeting shield against the encroaching darkness. I ran for my life, for my very self, into the uncertain night.